Hey guys, Hamsterwheel here with a new video. Now, a while back I made a video analyzing how far into the Burning Crusade you'll replace your gear with Outland gear through quests. And while most of the gear won't be replaced in the very first zone, a lot of those items will be replaced a few levels later, and chances are you will have ditched almost every item you got in Classic when you get to max level. That being said though, there are a bunch of items that you can get in Classic that will still be relevant even at max level, and some even in raids like Crusade and Gruul's Lair. Now I'll try to stay away from super obvious things like loot from Crusade, as that is the very last boss of the last raid in Classic, so of course that loot is going to be insane even in the Burning Crusade. And things like Atiyesh, the legendary caster staves, are also a bit too obvious of a choice. Anyway, let's talk about 15 items that will still be relevant in the Burning Crusade. Let's start with the Icestalk Waistcord, a really good caster belt that drops off of Cthulhu. This belt packs a whopping 41 damage and healing and some spell crit. And when we compare it to two belts that drop in the Burning Crusade heroic dungeons, you can see that even at this gear level, the classic belt can hold its own. Sure, it has less base stats, but none can hold a candle to the massive amount of spell damage this belt has to offer. So while the other belts might still be better, I mean the Belt of Depravity does have spell hit and a higher rating, the Icestalk Waistcord can definitely hold its own and will still be relevant even in heroic dungeons. Next item I want to talk about is Drakefang Talisman. This trinket offers 56 attack power, 20 hit rating and 12 dodge rating. And while there are trinkets out there that match the attack power of this, there's very few trinkets in the game that offer that much passive attack power alongside 20 hit rating and 12 dodge rating. There are obviously better choices out there when you get into level 70 heroic dungeons, but as displayed, this trinket can still be a good asset to your gear even in your high 60s and when you just hit level 70. Next on our list are the Rockfury Bracers. Bracers with 7 stamina, 27 damage and healing and 8 spell hit rating. These will be on every caster's best in slot list because there's no other bracers in the game that offer such a large amount of spell damage and some spell hit rating. And as it turns out, these bracers are still really powerful in the Burning Crusade. Here are two bracers that drop out of heroics, and while the Arcanium Signet bands do beat the Rockfury bands in terms of pure damage, the combination of spell hit and big spell damage on the classic item can't be ignored. And while yes, the Arcanium Signet bands obviously provide more base stats, in terms of pure offensive stats, the Rockfury Bracers still take the cake in my opinion. Even the Crimson Bracers of Gloom barely beat it, because while it also has more base stats and more spell hit rating, it has 5 less damage and healing than the Rockfury Bracers. So yeah, there you go. If Ahn'Qiraj goes live and you get these bracers, you'll probably want to hold on to these as they'll still be relevant even in heroic dungeons and possibly even tier 4 raids. Then we gotta talk about the Darkstorm Gauntlets. They provide 15 intellect, 19 stamina, a massive 37 damage and healing, and on top of that 8 spell hit rating. These gloves in Classic are insane, and there are no gloves out there that provide that much spell damage alongside some spell hit, which makes them insanely good in Classic. Of course, getting these requires killing Cthulhu and Ahn'Qiraj, so getting them might not be very easy. Anyway, how do these stack up against Burning Crusade items? Well, as it turns out, very good. Here are the blue level 70 dungeon gloves for Warlocks from the Burning Crusade, and while they do have more spell hit rating, they don't come close to the massive amount of spell damage that the Darkstorm Gauntlets offer. And these blue level 70 gloves for mages also have a real hard time beating out the Darkstorm gloves. They do offer a higher rating of spell crit and of course some extra base stats, but they don't offer the large amount of spell damage the Darkstorm gloves do. And yes, they do offer more crit, but in a situation where I'm raiding and I need all the spell hit I can get, yeah, I'll take the Darkstorm Gauntlets over these, thank you very much. Next up is a trinket that is every elemental shaman's wet dream, the Natural Alignment Crystal. Now in Classic this gave you 20% extra spell damage, and in the Burning Crusade they reworked this, and I understand because 20% in the Burning Crusade would be a little too insane. Still though, it now offers you 250 spell damage, which is an insane amount of extra bonus spell damage from a trinket. I mean, look at the average trinkets at level 70 you can get with a use. The Scryer's Blood Gem only offers 150 spell damage, the Arcanist Stone gives you 167 spell damage, None come even close to the 250 spell damage the classic trinket offers you. Sure, both the BC trinkets offer you a lot of spell hit rating, so in PvE, if you still need spell hit, the other ones are probably better. But when you want to do insane burst damage, oh yeah, the alignment crystal has got your back, and if you back this in Classic, I'd say definitely hold on to this very tightly for when Classic will eventually go to the Burning Crusade. And while we're talking about Black Lunaire trinkets, might as well talk about this one too, the Mind Quickening Gem. Now this item was also reworked in the Burning Crusade, where instead of 33% casting speed, they changed it to a fixed rate of 330 spell haste. And while this is an item you can get fairly early on in Classic raids, it can still hold a candle in the endgame content of the Burning Crusade. Sure, it offers no extra passive stats like we've seen in previous trinkets, but this item is still hugely popular in Battleground, where quick casts are sometimes the difference between life or death for a mage. I've seen several mages who use these in Burning Crusade PvP videos for super quick sheeps and whatnot, and I have no doubt that this trinket alongside the PvP trinket will be an absolute killer combo for mages in the Burning Crusade that want to focus on battlegrounds and arenas. Even for dungeons and raids, that 330 spell haste for 20 seconds vastly increases your casting speed for things like Fireball, and during quick boss fights this might be a preferred choice over the regular trinkets that you can get in this expansion. Next up on our list is Thunderfury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker. Now yes, the DPS and the base stats this blade offers is already not exactly top notch in Classic, with some weapons in Classic doing more than 10 DPS than this blade, and it's even less impressive in the Burning Crusade. But this blade still has a great place in dungeons and raiding, and that's because even in the Burning Crusade, this is still a very desirable weapon for all you warrior tanks out there, as the proc really helps with getting AoE threat and of course a reduced attack speed for taking less damage. I've seen tanks myself running around with this weapon on Burning Crusade private servers, and if you need more proof that this weapon will still be really good for warrior tanks, well, a little warrior who went by the name of Kungan used this weapon for a very long time, and even he said he used this in the Black Temple, a tier 6 raid. Let me just reiterate this. A weapon you could have gotten a while back in Classic, with Black Lunaire being the newest raid tier, is a weapon that after Ankh-Raj, Naxxramas, Karazhan, Gruul's Lair, Magtheridon's Lair, Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest Keep is still to some tanks the preferred weapon of choice. That just goes to show how insanely good that proc is off this weapon, and this is also why tanks definitely have a right to get this weapon first over any other class in the game. Next up we gotta talk about the Leggings of Polarity. Cloth pants with 20 stamina, 14 intellect, 44 damage and healing and 28 spell crit rating. Now yes, these are best in slot for DPS casters in the game, so obviously that means that these are probably going to stack up really well against Burning Crusade gear. And stack up they definitely do, as these level 70 mage pants have less crit, less damage and healing, though admittedly more base stats, while the Warlock pants offer spell hit instead of crit, but only 12 rating compared to the Polarity's 28 rating, and again also less spell damage. So while these two blue items provide a lot more base stats, in terms of offensive stats, the Polarity Leggings are still probably the preferred choice, unless you're really starving for plus hit and you're okay sacrificing some spell damage and a good amount of crit for that 12 hit rating. Next up I want to talk about the Pure Elementium band, a ring with 10 intellect, 10 spirit, 9 stamina, 53 healing and 18 damage. Of course, this was reworked later in the Burning Crusade, where all the gear with bonus healing also got a third of that total healing in damage. But it's really about that 53 healing we're gonna focus on, and as you will see right now, this ring still holds up really well against level 70 blue items that drop in dungeons. Sure, both of these have more healing, but as you can see the difference is very small, only 4 extra healing, so it is clear that this band that drops off of Neltharion can still serve you really well when the Burning Crusade goes live. Which really goes to show just how powerful this awesome ring is that you can get fairly early on in doing classic raids. Speaking of Neltharion, we gotta talk about one more item that drops off of him, and that is Neltharion Steer, a trinket with 44 damage and healing and 16 hit rating. Now this trinket is absolutely insane for casters in Classic, and it appears on many best in slot lists for a very good reason. There's nothing in Classic that offers you that amount of damage and healing with that much hit rating on just one trinket slot. And in the Burning Crusade, this item is still really valuable. The Arcanist Stone you see on screen right now does offer you more hit rating, But even if you would use the trinket, the second it would come off of cooldown every single time in a fight, it can't beat out that massive 44 passive spell damage that the tier offers you. Even the icon of the Silver Crescent, a super popular trinket for people running heroic dungeons and tier 4 raids, has a hard time beating the tier. Sure, it only has 1 passive spell damage less, and the use does mean that in terms of pure spell damage, it offers more, but that 14 hit rating can be ignored on the tier, and if you really need the extra hit rating for raiding, then the tier is a really good choice even for raids. So yeah, I already talked about how insane this trinket is in other videos, and here it is back again. If you manage to get this as a caster, be very grateful that you're rocking this. And try to hold on to this, cause chances are you won't replace this anytime soon. Matter of fact, it is conceived to be best in slot for the entirety of Classic. So realistically, you won't replace this until you've ran all the Classic raid content, you made your way from 60 to 70, you do normal and heroic dungeons, and maybe you'll replace this when you start doing raids. It's just that darn good. Alright, let's check out another healing item, which is the Cloak of Sucrose. Probably butchered it, but there you go. Which drops off of Patchwork in Naxxramas, one of the early bosses in that raid. It has 12 spirit, 12 intellect, 48 healing done, 16 damage done, and 5 mana every 5 seconds. And when we compare it to cloaks that drop in the Burning Crusade in level 70 dungeons, we can see that this cloak really holds up against level 70 blue Burning Crusade items. Both TBC items can't hold a candle to the massive 48 healing this cloak has, and the Avian Cloak of Feathers only beats out the classic cloak in terms of 6 plus more intellect, while the Cloak of Scintillating Auras has some stamina and a little bit of extra spirit instead of MP5, but also can't touch the plus healing the Cloak of Sucrose has. So yeah, another item you won't replace anytime soon in the Burning Crusade. Moving on to one of my favorite caster rings in Classic, the Ring of the Fallen God. A ring with 6 intellect, 5 stamina, a massive 37 damage and healing and 8 spell hit rating. You can get this from handing in the Eye of Cthulhu quest in Cenarian Hold. And well, your average level 70 blue rings from the Burning Crusade simply can't touch this item in terms of its raw spell damage with the combination of some hit rating. Both the rings I'm showing you right now come nowhere near the 37 damage and healing the classic ring offers, and while both of these have a higher rating of another stat, I think the huge amount of spell damage and that extra hit rating is something every single caster would want who wants to start raiding in the Burning Crusade. So this is another item that is definitely still relevant and super powerful in endgame content in the Burning Crusade. Next up is the Kiss of the Spider trinket from Mexna in Naxxramas. This offers you 14 crit rating, 10 hit rating, and 200 haste for 15 seconds. Now the combination of those 2 passive ratings and a 200 haste buff make this trinket very unique in both Classic and the Burning Crusade. Most trinkets you'll come across from melees and hunters almost always have extra attack power, and haste is something that is extremely beneficial to classes like warriors and rogues, hence why the Dragonspine Trophy trinket is one of those trinkets that will be very desirable by a lot of players who play a melee class in the Burning Crusade. And sure, the Dragonspine Trophy is better with a massive 325 haste rating, but we're talking about an epic trinket that is considered to be an insanely good trinket in the Burning Crusade. If you would stack the classic trinket against some blue Burning Crusade trinkets, there is a good to fair chance that a lot of people will still want that combination of crit, hit, and that awesome haste buff. Moving on to the Belt of Neverending Agony, a super sought after belt for rogues for instance that drops off of Cthulhu. It has 20 stamina, 64 attack power, 14 crit rating, and 10 hit rating. This is another belt that really holds up well against endgame blue items in the Burning Crusade, with it coming really damn close to an average blue belt that drops in level 70 heroic dungeons. Yes, heroic dungeons. Let it be said that this will be another belt that if you manage to snag this off Cthulhu, you'll be carrying this with you for a very long time until you finally find something else that is better through gems or an epic that drops in raids. And then last but not least, the Cloak of the Devoured, also from Cthulhu. Yeah, we're having a field day with Cthulhu loot. Anyway, this cloak offers you 10 intellect, 11 stamina, 30 damage and healing, and 8 spell hit rating. This cloak is another really good item for casters, though not best in slot for the entirety of Classic. But just look at how well it stacks up against Burning Crusade items. What I have here is one of the best cloaks in the game in terms of tier 4 content. One of the best cloaks, it's got that sweet purple color, but just look how close the classic item comes. It has the exact same damage and healing as the Ruby Drape and has 10 spell hit rating less. Sure, the Ruby Drape also has more base stats, but for a cloak that isn't even from the last raid tier, and that is from a previous expansion where the level cap is 10 levels lower, it is staggering just how close this cloak comes to one of the best cloaks in the game in terms of tier 4 content. That just goes to show how insane the Cloak of the Devoured is, and it's another item, if you have it, that will stay with you for a very, very long time. And there you go folks, 15 items that will still be relevant in the Burning Crusade. I know there's probably more items out there that will hold up in the Burning Crusade, especially stuff from Naxxramas, but I felt like only mentioning stuff from Naxxramas would be a bit unfair, so I decided to only show a few items from that raid and try to look for items from lower raid tiers that will still hold up in the Burning Crusade. Anyway, I want to thank you for watching this video. I'm Hamsterwheel and have a good one.